is Band McMahon, Tim MacMahon. Howdy, partner.
There it is.
There we go. Howdy, partners. How you guys doing?
Hey, we're living all right. Trying to talk through this Kyrie thing in a way that I'm sure everybody enjoys that we're doing, right? I'm sure you've gotten that feeling that everybody enjoys when we talk about this Kyrie stuff.
I mean, honestly, today was a terrible day for the NBA. Just a lot of bad off-court news and developments with Kyrie Irving, with the Joshua Primo lawsuit being filed against him and the Spurs, Miles Bridges. Really a terrible, terrible day for the NBA.
When you look at it from your perspective, and you mentioned just the amount of news, the negative news coming out for this league, in your experience, how has the league in a way kind of handled things like this? You just take each one as they come and handle it the best they can. What have you seen in your experience of how the league goes about this kind of thing?
I mean, they're clearly flying by the seat of their pants on the Kyrie situation, and they tried kind of handling it gently. They tried being patient and working behind the scenes. Honestly, both the league and the Spurs and the Players Association, which Kyrie's a vice president of, which is frightening, they all came off as very soft early on. Adam Silver certainly, put a little bit of pressure on the statement he put out there this morning, and Kyrie was defiant. They worked behind the scenes. He had a terrible post-game press conference on Saturday, I believe it was. They work behind the scenes to, with the Anti-Defamation League, certainly the league offices involved, the Nets from the ownership level on down. And he came out today and was defiant again. And, based on the statement that was made, here's the big if. If the Nets hold true to the statement that they made, I do not think Kyrie Irving will play in Brooklyn again. That's a big if, because we saw how they backed down last year with the whole vaccine mandate situation. We've seen how they've let him really kind of run the franchise into the ground over the last few years. But basically they're saying he's currently unfit to be associated with a franchise. He has to meet these requirements that clearly he has shown no interest in doing, and we know how stubborn he is. Again, I think there's a pretty strong possibility that he is done playing for the Brooklyn Nets.
Now, Tim, there's two ways I want to go with this, and I'm drawn because I don't want to stretch this out too far. But, I mean, when it comes to this Kyrie thing, and this is kind of unfair to you because I'm asking a weird, probability or like percentage question, how much of this is actually what he said, and how much of this is the way that he has gone about responding to the negativity?
Yeah, I mean, him promoting, and I know he took umbrage with that word, but when you post a link on Twitter, that is absolutely promoting something. Him promoting the movie in the first place was horrendous. He was given plenty of opportunity to back off of that, what would have been just a okay, hey, we live and we learn type of situation. He basically opted not to back off of that. So really, I think the vast majority of this is the way that he has responded as the Nets, as the league office, as the Anti-Defamation League, people that they've tried to pull in to help here, as they have tried to work with him through this, he has essentially refused to cooperate. And that's why we're sitting here right now where he's suspended for at least 5 games, and I think the key words there being at least.
So let's turn our attention to some more positive things with this league, and specifically right here in Dallas. Luka Doncic on a historic pace, already averaging 36.1 points per game, 7 straight games with at least 30 points to start his season. Tim, is this sustainable given the amount of work that he has had to do to help this team get to where they are right now?
I don't necessarily think that it is something that you hope is sustainable. And what I mean by that is I don't think that being this reliant on one guy, regardless of how great he is, it's not proven to be a path to contending for a championship or certainly a title. He's very similar to Houston James Harden right now. I've always thought that was the best comp for Luka in terms of style of play, production, all those sorts of things. We know the Rockets ultimately weren't able to get over the hump. When they got close, he had a legitimate co-star. They obviously got closest when They went out and they had Chris Paul there. The Mavericks don't have a co-star. They don't have a co-star candidate, to be just real blunt about it. And so this is what they need from Luka right now. This is what they're going to need from him for at least the rest of the season, barring something that would be pretty shocking before the trade deadline. And it's asking a lot. Now, hey, he's in obviously much, much, much better shape than he was at the beginning of the last couple seasons. He alluded to that last night. But, playing 36, 37 minutes a night, leading the league in usage rate, you're asking an awful lot out of the guy.
We're talking to Tim MacMahon of ESPN on the Diamond Factory hotline here. And Tim, when it comes down to the bigs on this team, that's been a real big concern. And they thought that the Mavs thought that they had made a big addition in JaVale McGee to help stabilize that. He has looked creaky. He's not looked up to snuff of what you wanted. Do we have any understanding of why that is and where he stands currently with this coaching staff?
I mean, I think why, you can talk about, hey, this is a guy in his mid-30s who's basically been a backup his whole career. And while they promised him the starting job, it was understood that they were thinking he was going to be a 12 to 16 minute player, per night. He hasn't earned those minutes, and he has the promise. Dwight Powell to this point has had production that has been much more impressive, energy that's been much more impressive, impact that's been much more impressive. And, Jason Kidd, it kind of cracked the door last night for the first time to go on with Dwight Powell as a starter, to making that change. And it's obviously not a change that he wants to make, not only this early in the season, but this early in the 3-year contract for JaVale McGee. But I just think it's hard to, look at the film, look at the numbers, look at the impact, and justify not starting Dwight Powell over JaVale McGee at this point.
Which is such a wild thing to think about, given the fact that he was relegated to the bench after being a starter for the Western Conference Final appearing Dallas Mavericks last year and then signing JaVale McGee to a multi-year deal. Speaking of those bigs, I'm trying to keep this as broad as possible because I feel like you could take it in a lot of different directions. What's up with Christian Wood and this Dallas Mavericks team with respect to how they treat him, how they feel about him, not playing in late game situations? Take that where you want to go when it comes to Christian Wood and the Mavericks.
It's real simple. The Mavericks see Christian Wood as a bench scorer. And I hate to break it to, the people around Christian Wood, but so does the rest of the league. Jason Kidd has made it as clear as can be. He doesn't trust Christian Wood to close games. I mean, you heard his press conference after the Oklahoma City thing, which I thought that was a lot to kind of put all that meltdown at Christian Wood's feet. No, we tried him to close the lineup, but it was Jay Kidd's way of saying, hey, I don't think he's a closer. We gave it a shot. It didn't work, and we're not going back to it. And you saw last night, first half, Wood wasn't very good. Second half, he was really good. I mean, he was efficient. He was scoring. He put up numbers. With 4 minutes left, they pulled him from the game. I think you're going to see that on a regular basis. And, you can complain about it if you're Christian Wood, or you can embrace the opportunity to prove that you can contribute to a winning team. If you embrace that opportunity, I think you've got a chance to be in the Sixth Man of the Year conversation. I think you've got a chance to earn a nice new contract, whether it's staying in Dallas or elsewhere. If you complain about it, I think it might be difficult for C. Wood to find a job next year, as talented as he is. Listen, the Rockets tried really hard to trade him for a full year. It ain't like the Mavericks gave up much to get him. That kind of tells you what the market was for him. So, when he speaks, he's saying the right things. I think his performance, for the most part, so far this season has been good. I just think he's got to focus on the opportunity that he has, and not the opportunity that he wants, because one is reality and one's a dream.
Tim, what's the opportunity for improvement for these Dallas Mavericks? Obviously you've lost your secondary ball handling, prospect. There was a lot of hope on Christian Wood that is, maybe early on been dashed for some. Where's the hope for optimism with this team going forward?
I mean, the hope for optimism, let's be honest, is that they have a guy who's an MVP candidate, and that they have pieces that are proven to fit well around him as far as role players. listen, do you want me to sell you on a pipe dream as far as this season's Mavericks being legitimate contenders? I don't think they are. Like, I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your ass. You know, I mean, they miss Jalen Brunson. The fact they only have two real ball handlers on the roster is extremely problematic. And look, at some point, Luka's probably going to have to rest some games. Dinwiddie might have to rest some games. It goes from difficult to oof, oh boy. You know, I wish they would have signed Goran Dragic this summer. Didn't happen. They didn't think he could play. He's playing awfully well in Chicago. You know, obviously the Brunson situation was mishandled. You know, I think if you're talking about hope for the Mavericks being contenders, you've got to take a longer term view at it. You have a 23-year-old perennial MVP candidate. Unfortunately, you're still paying for the co-star that you whiffed on in Kristaps Porzingis, but after this next draft, you're full on picks. You know, that gives you an opportunity to be aggressive in the trade market, maybe bundle some of those things together. It ain't easy to find a co-star. I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that Nico Harrison's job is a piece of cake, but that's his mission, and I think we all understand. You can just look at the contractual situation with Luka that the clock's ticking on it.
Tim, final question for me when it comes to this team overall. Jason Kidd, obviously last year, a spectacular year, taking this team to the Western Conference Finals. This year off to a little bit of a rocky start. When you look at him and how he's approaching this season so far, what do you see in your observations about how Jason Kidd's approaching this team and what needs to change with that possibly?
I mean, you know, they've blown a couple of big leads, so that's rocky in that sense. But it ain't like this team came flying out of the gates last year. I think there's, you know, like we've talked about, there's some pretty significant flaws with the roster. And I realize that people don't like, you know, fans don't like necessarily the way that he has handled Christian Wood. But I think he's got a plan. He's being very deliberate about it. He instead of kind of pumping him up, it seems like Kidd has kind of tried to tear him down, to basically say, hey, it's going to be our way or the highway. And you know, that might be the best approach. I guess that's to be determined.
Tim, before we let you go, I'm really intrigued by this because as currently constituted, we all understand how we feel about this team. Is there any possibility of them making a move at some point during the season, or is that just entirely dashed without, you know, a lot of assets available?
I mean, you know, never say never in terms of possibilities, but I will say, you know, I mentioned they're still down a pick. They still owe a pick for Porzingis, and I don't think that the Mavericks can use a first-round pick to make a move that makes them a little bit better. If you know, they've got to keep those things ready to be bundled because they have to be able to pounce when the opportunity presents itself to get a legitimate co-star. You know, I always compare it to the situation with Giannis in Milwaukee. And if you remember, there was obviously a lot of discussion. Hey, is Giannis going to sign that second extension? Is he going to, you know, commit, you know, basically his entire prime to the Bucks? And we're you know, a couple of years away from that conversation heating up with Luka, but when did he do it? Right after they went out and made the Drew Holiday deal. Right after they, you know, threw all their draft picks in the pot and got a guy who was capable of being a co-star. The Mavericks desperately need to find their Drew Holiday trade, you know, their version of that deal at some point within these next two, if you're being really optimistic, 3 years.
You can find him on Twitter at ESPN_McMahon. He is part of the Hoop Collective with Brian Winters and host of the Howdy Partners show on YouTube. He is, of course, Tim MacMahon. Tim, I appreciate you letting me cash in my last one with you. And I'll catch you when I catch you at the AAC, my man.
All right, appreciate it, fellas.